In November 2023, a new nonfiction book hit the shelves called They Stole a City, Wilmington's White Supremacist Coup and the Families Who Live with Its Legacy Hewned. That headline, spilled out of a bookstore window, already feels like it carries more weight than a headline could convey because it recalls a word-for-word loss in a small town in North Carolina. The book is written by Lauren Collins, a longtime New Yorker staff writer who was born in Wilmington and has lived most of her adult life in Paris. Collins' book is not just a retelling of a historical event, it is an investigation into how that event continues to shape the lives of people long after it was committed. It follows families, black and white, in Wilmington today, and it traces how the violent takeover in 1898 still permeates their sense of safety, politics _name_ and even the way they think about their own identities. Communities that elected a coalition of white populists and black Republicans in the early 1890s were suddenly stripped of their power when white Democratic leaders, riding armed men, marched into City Hall and seized control. Around the same time, a writer named Philip Gerard published a novel called Cape Fear Rising that hid behind the facade of a fictional story. Gerard himself, whose book inadvertently references Wilmington, fathoms that his readers would think the events were far in the past, 1898 were long, long ago. He recently died in 2022, but a short cameo of him at the book's front of page serves to illustrate that even the people who once thought the event was only a historical footnote have been forced to reface it. The 1898 coup was recorded variously as a riot, a massacre and, for those who carried out the violence, a revolution. Collins is faithful to the evidence and calls it both a massacre for the death toll, which widely ranges from a dozen to several hundred, and a coup for the strategic objective, to make Wilmington white again. The tinderbox was a critical opinion in a black newspaper that rebut a white woman's career for more lynchings. 95% of the city was integrated at the time and had the highest share of black votes. The takeover reckoned changes a functioning interracial coalition in ways that still echo today. Collins grew up in a neighborhood that had been launched by white upper-class newcomers in the 1970s who went to the city to enter the cultural dynamics. She says her parents wasn't inclusive even knowing what was happening until just a decade ago. The book does not pit black and white against each other, it asks how, over the span of more than 100 years, the communities came to see the 1898 event as part of a larger historical context of racial tension. In addressing the topic, Collins strives to not be a simple historian. Instead, she uses her storytelling voice, one that is simultaneously witty and sometimes philosophical, to expose past injustices and help listeners and readers understand how the present emerged from the obscured past. Zooming back to today, a sizable proportion of Wilmington's street population now has fences labeling the boundaries where they once were separated by a microscope. Lyrics. While those voices of the city still are called white supremacist in journalism, a good number of them describe the white supremacists we call campers today. The harder part of the book is the families that lived across the book, while historically grounded, also tells their stories, caretakers of their mental, economic stability, and hope. Addition. So whether you're a resident of East Gutland or a curious outsider, this book invites you to question any assumption that what happened in 1898 is simply a distant past. It calls on the reader to ask, both in imagination and in fact, how that violent takeover continues to plague the sense of community in Wilmington. That is the core of it. The only sign-off I'll keep is that we've spoken about how hard histories can be carried. Thank you for listening.